starting with our opening morning keynote speaker, Dr. Yashika Neaves. Dr. Neaves is the Defense Support Service Center's Chief of Strategic Plans and Initiatives. She works at the Department of Defense Military Civilian Transition Office, and her role there is to liaise with companies, government agencies, and other partners to kind of help smooth the transition overall of service members from the military to the civilian world. Honestly, I cannot think of a better person to be talking to this crowd right now about the needs and the skills of service members, as well as what things you all can do to create a more welcoming environment. So I can't wait to hear what she has to say, and we do not have to wait anymore. Dr. Neaves, please come up.
Well, good morning, everyone. I'll definitely say that there are very few places I'd rather be this morning than right here in this room with employers across corporate, nonprofit, academia, local and federal government, who all have one central goal in mind, and that is to hone in on ways to improve recruiting, retaining, and really trying to professionally develop transitioning service members within your organizations. And I'll tell you, you are my kind of people. Now, this year, our nation is celebrating its 50th year as an all-volunteer force. I'll tell you, when I separated 20 years ago, I didn't realize at the time, but the military-civilian divide, or that culture gap in which you know someone or you have a family member who served, that culture gap, it's getting larger. So it's really good to be in a room with individuals that are really keen in on relating to veterans or trying to relate to veterans in the military within the American workforce. I come from a multi-generational military family, from the service of my father to me, and now my son. I'll tell you that I also married military. My husband of 23 years is now retired. And so I really understand that dual military role as well as that military spouse role. And I'll tell you that as a second generation veteran, that as a disabled veteran, that I'm honored to be here, a part of this investment that you're making at this conference, just to try to grab nuggets of insight, inspiration, and also trying to ensure that you can systemically change the outcomes of our veterans within the workforce, because they are the best and the brightest that our future has to offer. So there are three central points that I really want to talk to you about this morning, and that is: one, the military civilian transition strategic tenets; two, how to leverage the veteran candidates that you have, and also some actions to build momentum, maybe some you haven't even considered before, to increase your veteran outreach, to draw in larger pools of our military's top talent. Now, earlier, the veterans in the room were asked to stand, and I just asked by show of hands, how many non-veterans do we have here in the room? Wow. I want for everybody to recognize these individuals right here, because as we go throughout this conference, we have to show them appreciation from the simple lens that they are advocating on behalf of the less than 7% of our U.S. veteran population, and they haven't even served. And I'll tell you, to me, that speaks volumes. And so from me to you that had your hands raised, thank you. And all the veterans, absolutely. And all the veterans that continue to serve in your roles, I thank you as well, because of the fact that you're still taking care of your battle buddies. You're still continuing in your capacity as a civil servant. So my role serves under the Defense Personnel and Readiness umbrella within the Department of Defense Military Civilian Transition Office. And our sole purpose and our sole mission is really about improving the delivery of resources, information, and assistance that's provided through programs. And this is all about promoting the effectiveness and the efficiency to support those that are transitioning, as well as members of the National Guard and Reserves, their families, and communities worldwide. So before registering for this event, by show of hands, how many actually heard of the DoD Military Civilian Transition Office? Okay, a few. Awesome, awesome. How many heard of the Transition Assistance Program? I will say everybody that stood up and said that they were veterans should have had your hands up, because the DoD Military Civilian Transition Office is just 3 years old. It is a part of a DoD realignment, unlike the Transition Assistance Program, or TAP, which is 30 plus years old. And for those that may not know, TAP is a statutory program that is required for every transitioning service member that exits the military that has 180 days or more on active duty service. We prepare service members with career readiness skills, as well as ensure that they are trained before they become veterans. Now, MCTO, the office I work for, we have the policy oversight of TAP. Now, we don't do that alone, because the military departments, they execute TAP. But I'll tell you that this all happens in collaboration, led by the Department of Defense, Veterans Affairs, and Labor. And we lead this in conjunction with the Department of Homeland Security, Education, Small Business Administration, and the Office of Personnel Management. I tell you this because it's so important for you to understand that this means that these 7 agencies that we're working together to provide a common level of support across 200 locations worldwide, connecting a pipeline of over 200,000 service members back into the American workforce each and every year. So TAP is the training ground for our transitioning service members before they become veterans. And I'll tell you that I'm pretty privileged to say that I've been a part of the evolution of TAP as a part of my career. You see, I sat through it twice when I got out, back when pre-separation counseling was the only requirement that there was, and you just had to do that 90 days before. The VA benefits brief and the DOL workshop that taught you how to write a resume. When I got out, that was all optional, and I opted to take it twice. And I'll tell you that I was very blessed to have a chain of command that supported that. A few years later, I then became a TAP counselor with Serco as a contractor. I believe Serco is represented here in the room today. Awesome. That was about 18 years ago. And I'll tell you, that was my first introduction of on the ground, seeing and working with service members one-on-one, connecting with them as I too understood the uncertainties that they were going through, that psychological shift from warfighter to veteran. And then I went on to facilitate TAP as a local veteran employment representative, that 3-day employment workshop within a national capital region. Throughout that time period, I had the privilege of working with over 40,000 employers within the Virginia area. Not only that, I had the opportunity to develop workshops, job fairs, as well as employer panels. And I'll tell you that shifting from that to then manage TAP about 10 years ago in Korea was what really kind of shifted things for me within my career. And that is because that is when the Veterans Opportunity to Work Act was passed, the VOW Act. It significantly changed the Transition Assistance Program because it mandated that the VA benefits brief was taken, and it mandated that the DOL employment workshop was taken, and it included career readiness skills that were deliverables that service members had to do. And I'll tell you that while I was managing TAP, I was pretty excited. Why? Because I understood that it was elevating the program to a whole new level for those that came behind me. I went on to oversee education services, and within that portfolio, running the career skills program for the Army, as well as having oversight for the 2-day higher education track contract. And for the past 5 years, I've had the privilege to work with DoD. I've worked policy, evaluation and assessment, strategic communications. I've worked in so many different fields as it relates to looking at our organizational development and really kind of bringing in my multifaceted and practical knowledge just to lead strategic initiatives for my organization. But I'll tell you that while at DoD, the biggest evolution of TAP as a part of the FY19 NDAA, or the National Defense Authorization Act, for those that may not be familiar with that, it significantly changed the transition program as it relates to the commencement of the program. It shifted it from commencing no later than 90 days to no later than 365 days for those that are transitioning. And for those that are retiring, no later than 24 months. You're talking about significantly changing the entire program. Now to include individualized counseling, to include self-assessments, customized transition pathways. I'll tell you that transitioning service members receive more comprehensive transition preparation, information, support, and services than at any other time in our nation's history. And that's because, once again, TAP provides a common level of support, regardless of service, regardless of component, to approximately 200,000 service members each year at over 200 locations around the globe. And we're doing this with trained counselors, allowing service members to be in control of their transition process, to utilize these programs as best fit their needs. So if you ask me, does TAP work? I'm going to tell you yes. If you ask me, is TAP continuously making improvement? Yes. And do I think that we will continue to get better? Absolutely yes. But the real question here is, why is this important to you as an employer? Because this means that you can expect the best and the brightest, prepared and resourceful veterans of top talent ready to come work for your organizations and to make your organizations better than they've ever been before. Now, getting back to the three main points I want to talk about today, and that first one is the military-civilian transition tenets. The Department of Defense greatest strengths and achievements are our people. I'm talking about the 2.3 million active duty and reserve component members and the over 900,000 DoD civilian employees. DoD realizes that as an executive branch of the government, that our people make us better. The Defense Secretary Austin priorities are to 1, defend the nation, 2, take care of people, and 3, access and success through teamwork. Now, there are 8 military transition tenets that are aligned with the Secretary's priorities, and that is readiness, recruiting, retention, reserve affiliation, reducing unemployment compensation, sustainable business model, as well as economic prosperity and leadership imperative. What if I told you that these strategic tenets aren't just central to MCTO or to DoD, but they very well may align with yours too? You see, our strategic tenets are hinged upon being a force multiplier, supporting readiness, recruitment, and retention. Those first 3 pillars really act as what your diversity, inclusion, and accessibility workforce programs do, which are being that foundation to create conditions for veterans to be successful, to be visible, to be viable within their communities, which means then they'll serve as ambassadors, influencing and advising and also mentoring other young Americans. And for the case of DoD, that means sustaining an all-volunteer force. But in your case, that means sustaining your Veterans Initiative programs for your companies, for your corporations, for your agencies. Our 4th tenet is about the reserve affiliation. You can consider that your part-time or your adjunct work, because work, whether full-time or part-time, lowers our unemployment compensation, our 5th tenet. And that is just as important to DoD as it is to you all. And I'll say that the great thing about it is that we're making strides. I don't know if you've heard, but in our recent BLS reports, the veteran unemployment rate is lower than a national rate. And I truly believe that that is by in part because of employers like you. From our lens, we want not only to create, but to sustain this business model, tenet 6, for economic prosperity of our nation, tenet 7, which should be at the forefront of every good leader. Thus, our last strategic tenet is the leadership imperative, because great leaders know that accession, retention, and attrition must be considered holistically in order to maintain an effective organization. So our strategic tenets are important to understand because they help us, as well as they help you to understand as an employer why you're solidifying your investment in veterans in the workforce, while understanding our investment to train and prepare service members for transition. So let's talk about leveraging essential or soft skills for our veteran candidates. Just so we're clear, when I say leveraging essential skills or soft skills, I'm talking about leveraging non-technical skills. Skills such as leadership, decision-making, persistence, skills such as dependability, operating safely, being able to handle stress within a work environment. These essential skills are skills that you as employers value and need to make your organizations better. So why are these non-technical skills so important to the American workforce? I'll tell you why. Because only 12% of the American workforce back in 2017 required a high level of knowledge within a technical domain. And that has significantly decreased today to almost half. So we're talking about 7% of the American workforce requires knowledge within a technical domain, meaning that there is 93% of the American workforce that is in dire need of non-technical skills. I'm talking about your organizations in dire need of these non-technical skills, skills that are stitched into the very fabric of our military service members from accession to transition, whether they've served 2 years or 20 years. You see, DoD is one of the largest providers of training and education. For the most part, you're talking about proportionally recruiting right out of high school and demanding proficiency, whether starting at basic training, starting at ROTC within college, or starting at a prestigious service academy. But that training then begins to extend throughout that service to involunteer education programs, on-the-job training, credentialing, and a continuation of leadership responsibilities. So I'll share you a personal story of mine and my first introduction of understanding essential skills and what that really brings to the table as a veteran. It actually happened as a part of my very first job out of the military, in which I was applying for a position at Army Community Services to be an intake specialist. And there are two interesting things that come out of this and two key takeaways that I want you to have. So I was getting ready and preparing for this interview. I had gotten down my 30-second pitch, right? I was ready to tell them all about myself. I had practiced my interview, potential questions that could be asked. I had studied the organization. I had really done my homework because TAP had prepared me. Like I said, I went through it twice. However, during the interview, there was a panel of 4. One panel member, who happened to be the hiring official and who also happened to be a retired sergeant major, he wanted clarification because he said, I hear what you're saying, and I look at your resume and I read your resume, but all I see is civilian work experience. Can you please share with me when you actually served in the military? Oh, so I said, okay, well, I'll break it down for you. When the position said administrative personnel specialist, that's when I was an Army S1 clerk, and I was handling military personnel readiness services. And in the position where I said that I was administrative management coordinator, that's when I was the quartermaster NCO handling logistics and acquisitions for my battalion. And where my resume states I was a program manager, that's when I was the NCOIC of the nuclear, biological, and chemical shop, as well as the weapons and training room. He said, oh, okay, I get it now. All makes sense. So I had impressed him enough, and I ended up getting the job. So I say this to say, don't be afraid to explore military civilian transferable skills. Whether you are talking to an individual that is articulating their civilian skills, even though you know that they are a veteran, or whether you're talking to a veteran that is saying a whole lot of military jargon and you're having a hard time figuring out what they're talking about, I'll tell you that the versatility of veterans is multifaceted. And I guarantee that you can leverage their essential skills no matter what position you're looking for. So the second interesting part and key takeaway of this story is that after I landed the job and got there, my supervisor informed me that one of the candidates that had interviewed for the position, that she came back and she wanted to know why she wasn't hired for the position. She felt she was the most qualified. She had her master's degree. And at that time, I didn't have my PhD. I had my associate's degree. And I don't think that she knew that. But I'll let you know what he did tell me is that he informed me that he told her that he selected the most qualified individual for the position. He went on to tell me that veterans bring to the table what no civilian with a degree could without military experience. And that's his words, not mine. He went on to say that the value of military soft skills, the professionalism, undoubtedly surpasses what he could teach any civilian in a year. Skills such as how to improvise, how to adapt, how to overcome, how to be resourceful and look for answers, how to lead, but also how to follow, how to be a team contributor with the mission in mind. That purpose, direction, and motivation is instilled in military members. And that is what he said to me, makes you as a veteran, without a question, the most qualified for the position over anyone with a master's degree. I'll tell you this, as a newly transitioned veteran over 20 years ago, the value that I brought to the workforce became more real to me than I ever knew as a service member. The key takeaway to this is don't hire a degree over a veteran with essential skills. Your company will benefit from the non-technical skills that veterans bring to the table in a long-term or a short-term degree. And I'll tell you this, if you land a veteran that does have a degree, then you've hit the jackpot. So back in 2017, my organization commission ran to look at essential skills. And that study looked at the Army and the Marine Corps combat arms. And it looked at the non-commissioned officers from E1 to E7, really to identify essential skills of the warriors within the workforce. It compared these service members to civilian equivalent experience levels from the entry level to senior level experiences and found that mid-level to senior level civilians have equivalent experience of that of Army and Marine Corps ranks E4 to E6. I want to repeat that again. Mid-level to senior level civilians have the equivalent experience of Army and Marine Corps ranks E4 to E6. This study pulled from the courses trained and key skills taught in previous, from basic training to advanced leaders course, and for the Marines, the corporal and sergeant's career course. The essential skills that were noted that came out of this study included interpersonal skills, oral communication, leading, motivating, inspiring others, decisiveness, persistence, attention to details, managing and supervising others. We're talking about from combat arm occupations in the ranks of E4 to E6. Now, when you look at the ranks of E6 to E7, you can add to the list project planning, written communication, critical thinking. This RAND study not only solidified essential skills that veterans bring to the table, it also solidified what my first supervisor told me and my first job experience. But it is a testament that veteran essential skills are critical and should be leveraged by every employer in the American workforce. With 93% of the American workforce in dire need of non-technical skills, our nation veterans are the answers to your company's needs. So let's talk about some actions. You all are here right now. You're already taking actions, right? So aside from being here today, what can you do to increase your outreach to draw in larger pools of military's top talent? I heard it was like over 200, right, that just got recognized. So that means there's a lot of smart people in the room who know what they're doing. But I would be remiss if I didn't share these. The first, I would say, action to take is to expand your veteran recruitment globally. This can be done by working with the Chamber of Commerce, hiring our heroes, and conducting worldwide career summits, because HOH summits are worldwide across military installations. And this is why DoD has an MOA with HOH, because we believe in leveraging the playing field for that 10% of transitioning service members that are at a disadvantage being overseas from their stateside counterparts who have the same talent as they do. MCTO and HOH will be headed OCONUS next week. Matter of fact, I'm leaving Saturday to Germany. And in Germany, we'll be in USAG Bavaria as well as USAG Rollin Falls, where Amazon, Toyota, and Troops and Transportation will be sponsoring both of those events to garner in military's top talent. Along with them, there are over 20 other employers that will be there. Employers like CAIC, Capstone LLC, Mantech, Circle, Community Bank, Raytheon, Mission, Wisconsin Partners, as well as some federal agencies, Department of Veterans Affairs, U.S. Secret Service. But we're all going to be flying to Germany, and they are going to be interviewing and offering positions to military members in advance of their transition. I know some of you will be there next week with me, and I look forward to seeing those that can make it. But for those that have not looked at tapping into the untouched potential of those transitioning service members overseas, please consider connecting with our HOH Career Summits. Germany is just the first step. We had to take a pause because of COVID, but we plan on kicking off in several other countries at multiple military installations in the years to come. The second action, I would say, is become a DoD Skill Bridge employer partner. By show of hands, how many already are? Awesome. That means everybody that had your hands down, those are the people you need to see. All right. Now, this program is a program that really started off as a pilot back in 2011, and it was decentralized with the military departments really kind of leading the way on that. And it really did not become centralized at the OSD level until 2019. And it was codified in law as a part of the FY 23 National Defense Authorization Act. So now Skill Bridge as a program is in legislation. In current state, DoD standardizes Skill Bridge MOUs. So if you need a memorandum of understanding with us, then it is centralized through our website, skillbridge.osd.mil. For those that may not know, Skill Bridge is established really to kind of bridge that experience of our military members with civilian occupations as well as employment opportunities. And this allows employers like you to sponsor a service member to participate in training, apprenticeship, as well as internship programs up to 6 months. They continue to get paid on active duty, and we ask for your guarantee that you will have a high probability of hiring them. So if you want to become a Skill Bridge employer partner, once again, visit the skillbridge.osd.mil website where you can sign up. We also have bi-weekly meetings, bi-weekly webinars, excuse me. And during those bi-weekly webinars, they are live. Employers are able to ask questions to learn that vetting process. If you have a MOU that's about to expire, please keep in mind that this is the new process, so you have to use the website. Another thing to keep in mind is that if you don't want to sign up to attend one of the bi-weekly webinars to ask live questions, it's also recorded, so you can watch an old one. But those bi-weekly come out, and the next one is April 19th. Registration is going to open tomorrow. The cap is 250 employers, and I'll tell you that most of the time we are capped at that 250 mark. This is a rapidly growing and accelerating program. I mentioned that at OSD level, it became centralized in 2019, and in 2019, we had about 4,600 participating service members that we were tracking. Last year, that 4,600 was 22,000. As far as employer partners, 2019, 150 we were counting, and just last month, nearly 3,000. So if you haven't jumped on the bandwagon, I encourage you to do so. The third action, I would say, is to connect with DOL American Job Centers. There are approximately 2,400 across the USA. You can post your jobs there free. And the great thing is that transitioning service members and veterans get advanced look at those for 48 hours before the general public. Also, you want to make sure that you are connected with regional veteran employment coordinators with DOL. We get a lot of questions about how can we get our jobs where there is the most need. And we will always direct you to DOL because those regional coordinators, they work hand in hand with the local veteran employment representatives. and the Disabled Veteran Outreach Program Specialist at the local level. And those individuals are connecting those qualified veterans with employers. I know, I did it, okay? So I tell you, leverage what you have through the American Job Centers. You'll hear more about those initiatives later on this afternoon when Mr. Rodriguez speaks concerning DOL. The fourth thing I would say is to highlight your company's veterans' hiring achievements. The achievements that were recognized today, whether it's through our DoD ESGR Employer Support Freedom Award or the DOL Hire Medallion, the Vet Index. I'm telling you, you really want to make it known that you are making strides and you're serious about supporting veterans and your veteran employees. So put it out there and let us know. The last thing I would say as an action to take is to invest in marketing campaigns. You may say, well, that's a no-brainer, but definitely utilizing commercials, your social media platforms will be able to expand your reach and include public influencers, include inspiring stories from veterans that work with your organizations. I'll tell you that from the DoD perspective, we understand that marketing really makes the public aware of what you bring to the table. And that is why for the FY24 presidential budget, we requested $40 million in joint marketing campaigns to boost the recruiting efforts across our military departments. Because we understand that positive public familiarity produces public trust and you as an employer of choice. So in closing, I just say that the pipeline of veteran talent is the top talent, bar none. And with employer advocates like you, we can take care of those who sacrifice so much for our nation. I say utilize understanding the military transition strategic tenets, leverage the essential skills of those veteran candidates that you have, and taking actions will reap dividends to build a better tomorrow with continuous process improvements. DoD, in concert with passionate employers, will cultivate the necessary support for our nation's workforce with veterans to build and lead your organizations. In the words of J.F. Kennedy in 1963 at the Thanksgiving Day proclamation, as he spoke these words pertaining to our forefathers, I now speak these words pertaining to our veterans, and that is that as we express our gratitude, we must never forget that the highest appreciation is not utter words, but to live by them. I thank you for your time, and I look forward to meeting each and every one of you during the breakout sessions.